Hello everybody, my name is Rabbi David, and today we're going to talk about Judaism and aliens. Now, aliens, not necessarily little gray men that coming down from a spaceship from Mars or a galaxy far, far away. Aliens in Judaism, I mean things that are alien to this world. So there is a mentioning throughout Jewish scholarly writings and throughout the Torah and also throughout the rest of the Tanakh, which is the prophets and the writings, about things that are out of this world, that are alien to humanity. And I thought this would be an interesting subject to talk about, especially when this video is going to be shown throughout the department, and try to keep it light and interesting, and let me know what you guys think, if you like it or not. My name again is Rabbi David, and I work for from the Jewish chaplain at Folsom State Prison. So, interestingly enough, I wanted to start with our writings that it's called The Ethics of Our Fathers. In English, it's Pirkei Avot in Hebrew, and it means all the things that the sages of Judaism during the time of the end of the Second Temple mentioned and brought down in writing. And they said some interesting thing in that tractate. They said 10 things were created at twilight of Shabbat Eve. Shabbat Eve, it means the first Shabbat Eve after the creation of the world or the universe by God in the 6 days of creation. And the rabbis continue on and said these are the mount of the earth that swallowed Korach, which is the Torah portion we read last week, the mount of Miriam, well, that gave water to the people of Israel when they were walking through the desert, the mount of Bilam donkey, as we remember from the Torah, the donkey of Bilam starts speaking to him out of nowhere. The rainbow that was given as a sign, as an oath between God and humanity, or Noah, that he will not destroy the world again. The manna, right? We all know the manna that the Israelites have eaten throughout their 40 years in the desert. Moses' staff, the staff that he used to make the Nile River into blood and to cross the ocean. The shamir. So the shamir is an interesting thing. It's mentioned that King Solomon had a special worm, that his name was the shamir, and he used the shamir to cut the giant rocks where he built the first temple. As we know, there is a commandment that no metal should be swung, should be punched on the rocks that we build the temple, because metal is used as a tool of war, and the temple is supposed to bring peace to the world. So they need to use an extra special tool to cut those rocks, and that tool is referred to as the shamir. So the shamir was created in the eve of Shabbat, of the first Shabbat. The writing, it means the inscriptions of the tablets of the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments right there on the eve of Shabbat. Some say also the burial place, the burial place of Moses, and the ram of our father Abraham. So we know that Moses' burial place is an unknown place, that God have buried Moses in that place, and the ram of Abraham is that special ram that Abraham have sacrificed instead of sacrificing Isaac in the time of the Akedah. And some say also the spirits of destruction, as well as the original tongues, for tongues are made with tongues. Now, what are those tongues? So, as we know, in the old days, the blacksmiths needed to use a special set of tongs or tongues to take the sword out of the fire, and then they used to hammer the metal into perfection. But they need to use those tongs to get the metal or the ready hot flamed ore of steel out of the fire, out of the furnace, before they started pounding it and shaping the metal into anything, basically anything they needed metal for. So the tongs, the first tongs that humanity used was given to us by God, and that's what the rabbis here mention. Interesting that the first tongues that given to us from an extraterrestrial, from out of the first tongue came out of this world. The introduction of production of metal came from out of this world, not specifically in our world. And it says like this in Isaiah. Isaiah mentions who was the first blacksmith, or the mentioning of the first blacksmith in the book of Isaiah. In chapter 54, verse 16, it says, "Behold, I have created the blacksmith that blew the fire of coals, and created a weapon for his work, and I have created the tyrant to destroy." So who is that tyrant? Probably the first man who used weapons against other men. As we know, you can use a knife to slaughter an animal and eat it in a kosher way. You can use a sickle to cut wheat, and you can make metal plows to harvest the land and to work through the land. But you can also make great destruction, and that's what God meant. So then we see in Genesis, we have a mentioning of creatures that are out of this world again. It says, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, Bereshit for the Hebrew speakers, it says, "The Nephilim were in the earth in those days," the days after man was cast away from the Garden of Eden. "And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of man, and they bore children to them." Interestingly, that even though they came from another planet or from another existence, they were able to come into this world and procreate with us and bring in those third creatures. So we have humanity, we have the Nephilim, and then we have the sons of God who then are able to procreate with the daughters of men. And so their offsprings would be the third or even the fourth creation, or the fourth type of species that are walking around this earth. Now, we don't know where they are today, but we know that they were here when the Torah is mentioning them. And then it's interestingly, I thought about mentioning it, when you read accounts of people that are abducted by aliens, or if you watch all kind of crazy theories like that, and it doesn't matter if you believe that or not, but the account, some of them, is that they were forced to procreate with those aliens, so that those aliens have procreated with them. And it comes around that there's, I think, a famous, when I did the research to write about this, I saw there was a famous thing in Argentina when there was some guy who everybody bought into that story, and he mentioned him having to do something like that. And we also have in Judaism a couple of ideas that talks about demons and angels, and are they or are they not allowed to procreate with humans, and what is those, for example, if a human makes a sin, he might create something that is considered to be a demon that then later on can either hurt them or affect them. So that's why there is a perception in Judaism, and not a perception, I'm sorry, but the idea behind you preserving yourself from making a sin, because you might create something that will end up hurting you or hurting others. And that might be that procreation, not necessarily that they are physically procreated, but that in some spiritual level those two creatures was able to connect to each other and create something new that wasn't good for humanity, wasn't what God intended to roam around this earth. There's another mention in Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 19. There is an instruction on what to do when or if we meet aliens. So interestingly, the Torah, which is the tool, the code of law that God gives to the Jewish people through Moses, included in it what happens if we meet something that is greater, stronger, from somewhere far away, and how should we address that? And let's read that. It says, and when you lift up your eyes onto the heavens, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts in the heavens, don't draw away and worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath scattered unto all the peoples around the whole heaven. So God, through Moses, give us an instruction that says that if one day some magical spacecraft will ever land on Earth somewhere, and little green man gonna come out of it, we are not to worship them because they are God's creature that God created, that's scattered throughout the heavens. So they are nothing. They're not omnipotent. They're not unique. They are not, maybe not exactly like us, but they are still subject under God. And I think that's the idea that God gave us, is that we shouldn't be admiring or worshiping certain things that come from places that we don't specifically know, but we need to remember that God, because God created the universe and created the earth and everything in it, that He might, or He did, create other things out there that we don't know about, and that if one day we see them or encounter them, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are to worship them. We are still to worship God and to follow God's commandments, and not that new thing that just came into our neighborhood. There's another very, very interesting mentioning of other lives in the book of Judges, in chapter 5, verses 20 to 23. It talks about the planet of Maruz. So Maruz or Meroz, depends how you pronounce it in English and in Hebrew. And it says like this: they fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. So we know there was a big fight against Sisera, and Sisera was a king who fought against the people of Israel, and Deborah the prophet prophesies that he will fall down for a woman, and it says that the heavens came down, or the stars in the heavens came down to help Israel fight Sisera, right? So it says the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Those stars came and fought Sisera. And then in the end, when there is a mentioning of what happened by Barak, right? Barak is the Barak and Dvorah, they recount of how they fought the war, and it says like this in verse 23. It says, "Curse ye Meroz," said the angel. The angel, obviously, it's Barak, who is the emissary of God in that specific account. So it says, "Curse ye Meroz," said the angel of the Lord. "Curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the mighty." So, what do you mean the inhabitants of Meroz? One can say he cursed the planet itself, but he didn't. He cursed the people, or those creatures, or those inhabitants of the planet Meroz, who didn't came to the assistance of the people of Israel when they fought. So, interesting. Who are they? Where is that planet Meroz? I read some, against researching for this topic, I read some commentaries from other rabbis and some rabbis that practice astronomy, and they mentioned more or less what it is. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's interesting to mention that during the time of Judges, when we read in the book that yes, the heavens came down and fought with the people of Israel against Sisera, that one nation in the heavens, this nation of Meroz, in the planet of Meroz, they decided not to come. And the judge, which in our case would be Barak, cursed them. the inhabitants of that specific planet, because they didn't come to help the Lord or to help his people fight against Isra. And then we read more in 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 2, and it says, it's the famous story of Elijah the prophet rising to the heavens in a fiery chariot. And it says like this, and it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which parted from both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. So we see here a mentioning of the chariot of God even before the story of Ezekiel. Now let's read the story of Ezekiel. So in Ezekiel chapter 1, when he mentioned the chariot, and it says like this, now, it says, this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spoke. And it says, and when I looked, behold, a hand was put forth unto me, and a roll of book was therein, and he spread it before me, and it was written within and without. So the account of Ezekiel, when he saw the likeliness of God, and he says that likeliness approached them with a human hand, and here we see a human, Elijah the prophet, going up to the heaven in a fiery chariot, right? Which means that there is a place in the heavens or in that specific location for humans. Because if Ezekiel saw something humane coming down, and Elijah, who is the human, went up, it means there is something there. We don't know exactly what. We can assume. There is a lot of commentaries about the story of Ezekiel and the story of Elijah going in a fiery chariot upon the heavens, and people can only imagine what it is, and we don't need to undermine it, and we can just need to keep an open mind and say, what, God's glory fulfills and fills the entire universe, and if that's how he chose to manifest himself, then that's how he chose to manifest himself, and we are here to learn. So, and I wanted to finish with one more account, and of the man, right? There is an account of Ezekiel in chapter 40 that he meets a man, and he says like this. He says, behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand and a measuring reed. And that's the story of that angel that gives Ezekiel the measurements of the third temple. But he had the appearance of brass. He had to wear some kind of a protective gear when he was showing Ezekiel what he was doing. That likeliness of brass, that appearance, is not mentioned any other place in the Bible. But Ezekiel see that man or that creature or that angel or whatever definition you want to make to it, and that person gives him measurements of the third temple. And that's another account, and it's the last account that I have time to talk about. And this motif of out of this world, extraterrestrial, and not necessarily little green men from Mars that riding around spaceships, but things that are beyond human perception, that exist within the universe that God created for us, that are alien to us, alien to humanity, are actually written down within Jewish scripture and within Jewish writings. and I thought it might be an interesting mentioning. And of course, there is more, but this is all the time I had to talk about it now. And I hope everybody will have a blessed week and